Thanks for doing the interview.
Thank you, sir.
I want to start with this question. Being sheriff is an interesting combination because you're a lawman, but you're also a politician, especially in the run-up to an election. So how are you settling into that new role?
Yeah, it's totally different from being a chief of police. You know, being a politician, now I get to have my own opinions on different things happening in the community, different things happening throughout the state. But at the same time, we're here to uphold the law. So it is a little bit different, but it's one that I'm enjoying and getting used to.
Your assessment of the sort of public confidence in this agency before you took over, before you won, do you think there was a lot of confidence in it or not a lot?
I don't think there was a lot. I think people were ready for change, and I think that's evident by the fact that I had beat the last sheriff by close to 30 points in the primary election. I think that was pretty much an indictment against a lot of the things that had transpired here. I think they were tired of the corruption, unprofessionalism, and wanted to see a new day here in St. Lucie County. So they've pretty much, even through the general election, which, you know, is a contested between Republican, Democrat, you know, winning by more than 13 points, I think sends a clear message that they're behind what I stood for and what I do stand for, you know, in our campaign platform, that what we wanted to bring here to St. Lucie County. And so they wanted a mandate for change, and that's what we're delivering on right now.
Sort of same question, but not applied to the public perception of the agency, but from inside the agency.
Yeah.
Among the, you know, the deputies and the folks that work for the sheriff's office. Was there a lot of confidence in what was happening here?
So I don't believe so. Again, the union, the frontline men and women deputies that work, you know, in law enforcement, came out. Their union endorsed me against my opponent, who was a sitting sheriff at the time. And so I think that said a lot about the things that they wanted to see change. But change, you know, comes with a heavy price tag, because now that we're implementing change, you know, some people are happy about the changes, some people are not. I think overwhelmingly people are. But it's been a whirlwind since we've gotten here on January 7th. I mean, we hit the ground running very hard, and it's been very dramatic.
What do you think is the biggest threat to public safety in the county, and what can you do to address it?
Biggest threat to public safety in this county, I think, is just public trust. I think that's something we got to earn each and every single day, because once that erodes, and like we've seen that before throughout the country, once you lose the public's trust in law enforcement duties, you lose that legitimacy. I think it's very hard to do your jobs. People stop giving you information. They stop calling the police when they need them. And so from a law enforcement standpoint, that's something we can never feel entitled that we just have. We have to earn that each and every single day. And so being a professional agency, having the highest standards and values are just so important. Those are some of the things we ran on as a campaign team, and we want to implement here at the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office, so we maintain that public trust and improve upon it every day.
Did this agency need to be overhauled?
Absolutely, 100%. We've had really 2 sheriffs in the last 40 years. The organizational structure, a lot of the systems that are in place really haven't changed over that time. And so we got to bring it up to the, you know, this current generation now. And I think we're doing that, you know, at a very fast pace, almost sometimes too fast, I think. Because, you know, one of the things you have to always ask yourself, how much change can the organization handle at one time?
Okay.
And I'm used to working at a certain pace. That doesn't mean everyone else is used to working at that pace. So I got to throttle it back every once in a while and make sure that you know, we stabilize a little bit, that everyone can digest the information. Because one of the things that I think is just so important, and one of the things I don't think I've really done a good job at since being here, is communicating a lot of the changes. We've been implementing things, and sometimes I take for granted that the message is going to get down. There's over 800 employees here, and it's a very decentralized operation. We're here at headquarters. We have a jail, courthouse, schools. So I don't get to touch everybody every single day, but there's no reason for poor communication, especially with the technology we have here. And so the thing that I have to do better is getting out, meeting with the masses, meeting with the people, making sure they understand that the changes are in the best interest of the organization, best interest of the community, and their best interest as well, because we're striving to become that premier law enforcement agency.
How was the budget when you became sheriff here?
The budget's very large. It's over $100 million, and it's actually a little, from the county, we get about $101 million, and then we have other funding mechanisms like federal inmate housings, another $3 million, another $10 million from the school district to fund the school resource deputy program. So the funding's there, but being fiscally conservative, one of the things I ran on was creating a fiscally transparent and responsible budget. not a very transparent budget at all.
I heard it was kind of disorganized too.
It's not what I'm used to.
Okay,
And
talk
so,
more.
yeah, so I'm used to working with a board. You know, when I worked at the city, I worked with the city council, and every year we had to produce a line item budget that very detailed where every single dollar was being spent. And if I didn't spend those dollars in that areas, I had to justify why I was moving it to basically a budget amendment. As the sheriff, constitutionally, you're given your funding by the Board of County Commissioners. And then from there, they really don't have any oversight on your budget. You can basically move money from this section to that section. I'm not used to doing it that way.
You have a lot of autonomy.
A lot of autonomy, a lot of power, and that comes with a great deal of responsibility. You know, so although the power is good, power left in the wrong hands could be very dangerous in government. So I like a little bit of oversight. One of the things we're doing right now is creating a different budgeting model, and we have to turn that in by May 1st to our county commission here, to our Board of County Commission. And it's going to be a very, very transparent budget and fiscally responsible. You know, we understand the difference between needs and wants. You know, I suffered through the Great Recession back in 2007. Nobody did more with less in the city of Port St. Lucie, you know, than that team, and we produced an unbelievable result. Understanding the difference between needs and wants, we worked with what we had, and we produced a very efficient, effective crime reduction model with what we had, and we can do that here as well. You know, you look at the trends all over, not only nationally, but now in the state. You know, they have the departments of government efficiency where they're going in and making sure we're spending our tax dollars right. Is there any wasteful cutting?
Doge.
And the thing about that is, though, in a government budget, 86% of our funding really goes to salary and benefits of employees. When you have 800 employees and you want to make serious budget reductions, you know, you can only cut so many paper clips before you get to people. And so I've been through that process before, and I never want to go through that again. So it's very important that we're working with our county commission, we're being transparent, they can feel good about what they're funding, we can produce a great result, and then we both win together. Law enforcement, traditionally in any government organization, is a big piece of the pie when it comes to the money.
Sure.
So that also takes away from some of the things that they may want to work on as county commissioners, such as parks, roads, different things like that. So I have to make sure that the money that they're giving me, I'm using it wisely, I'm producing a great result that they can be proud of, and that they can get a win for it too, because they're a politician just like I'm a politician. I'm running on a certain platform. They have to fund that platform every year. And so we have to work together. I'm hoping we can do that moving forward. I hope, I don't think they've been really treated fairly over the past 40 years, to be quite honest with you. They don't really know where the money's going. There's always questions. There's not transparency. And that's got to change. They should have a 5-year plan from us where we're going from capital improvement projects like our fleet, buildings, many different other things, where the agency's going so they can properly prepare and budget accordingly. It's not fair to show up every year and go, hey, by the way, I need 40 cars. I need 50 cars this year. That's not proper planning. That's not even good management practices. So we're going to be working on those things, making them understand what our needs are, and hopefully we can get there, meet in the middle, and have a win-win for everybody.
Okay, what's an accomplishment that you would like to talk about that you were able to achieve, in the first 100 days?
A lot of accomplishments so far. Day one, and this was honestly, I kind of attribute being able to do this to my predecessor, because when I won the general election, he brought me on the payroll as the undersheriff, and I was able to start working on the transition towards my administration. So I was able for a couple months to work here, kind of get a decent feel for the organization, kind of see, where we were deficient.
You got a lay of the land.
Got a lay of the land. And I was, working closely, coming from the city of Port St. Lucie, I did work closely, but I wasn't here able to talk to employees and see what happened. And like I said before, this agency really hadn't changed in the last 40 years from a structure standpoint. So I implemented a strategic reorganization the very first night that I took over. Once I was sworn in at midnight, the email went out. It's a new day at the sheriff's office. We're implementing the highest standards and values, a standard of performance that this agency really has never seen before, and also a complete reorganization of the management. There was a complete lack of command staff management in this organization. We had 4 captains for 800 employees, 3 majors. I mean, that's just not a lot of management for an agency this size. And consequently, I think a lot of things and a lot of systems weren't really done to the best of their ability. I think they did the best that they could with what they had. You know, when you have one captain managing training for 800 employees, he's in charge of 70 school resource deputies. He's in charge of 50 people at the courthouse and security. That's too much to ask one person to do. And consequently, you're going to get, I think, an average work product out of that. You're not going to see continuous improvements. And so I think, you know, going and increasing the command staff here and then restructuring the entire organization to make it more efficient and effective, that's what I'm most proud of so far. And in doing so, we have just implemented so many other changes throughout the agency so far. I mean, the list is very long. I think anybody might even be happy to accomplish that over 4 years. What we've done in 100 days is just the start, and we're going to keep moving forward and bringing this agency back to where it needs to be, right at the top.
There have been some conversations about the sheriff's office taking over or replacing local police departments in the county. There have been various reasons for those conversations. Where do those conversations stand now?
So they've kind
There's
of
one that I'm talking about specifically. You know the one I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
so no, and just to be fully transparent, I mean, I was asked this when we were on the campaign trail because there was a very tough union negotiation going on in the city of Fort Pierce and the Fort Pierce Police Department. For many years, that's been talked about. And I always say the same thing. I'm not an advocate for taking over any city police department. If that happens, I mean, we'll do what we have to do. But that's really up to a city commission to decide. That's up for their city commissioners to decide what investment, how much they want to do. I do think, I'll stand by this statement, I said it while I was on the campaign trail, they need to make a capital investment in that police department because it does become a safety issue, I believe, when you see constant turnover, you're not retaining the best and the brightest talent, and you have a lack of experience working throughout the organization, that could jeopardize public safety. I think the police chief there over 10 years has done a really admirable job of keeping up with what she can despite not having, I believe, the necessary funding to do the job at the top level. And I think that's something that they're working towards. I mean, Fort Pierce, you look at that city, what it's accomplished over the last 10 years, it's been pretty remarkable. I mean, that downtown is booming. I think they have a lot of things to be proud of. But, you know, we're going to work with them. I've met with the chief at the city of Fort Pierce. One of the things I wanted to do coming into office, and just something that never happened while I was the chief or while I was an assistant chief in Port St. Lucie, the sheriff never reached out to us to say, hey, what can I do to help you and make Port St. Lucie a safer community? I want to be more of a servant leader where it's not about just the sheriff's office. It's about what we can do to leverage our resources, work with our partners in Port St. Lucie, Fort Pierce. I went and met with her at the city of Fort Pierce Police Department, and that was the conversation. What can I do to help? And we want to be good partners. I don't want to interfere in anything that she's doing because she has a game plan that she believes in is going to make that city successful. I believe in it as well. And I want to support it, not be different, coming in different, doing a different style of policing. So I think her and I are on the same page. We have a very good relationship. We have a great relationship with their command staff. They're working extremely hard to make those improvements. But those conversations have really died down over the last several months. And so I don't see any movement towards that at all.
Talking about relationships, what would you say of how things stand between the sheriff's office and the prosecutors in the county?
Oh, it's great. Yeah, I have a great relationship with Tom Backadall, who's our state attorney.
Yeah.
And I've had great relationships with many of the state attorneys that have moved up the ranks there, you know, that are at the top now. Many of them have left to become judges and different things like that. So our relationship with not only the state attorney's office, but the public defender's office in Diamond Liddy has been very good. One of the things we heard about while I was on the campaign trail was access to inmates by defense attorneys. We've completely implemented new processes.
In the jail, you mean?
Yes. And protocols to get the defense attorneys access to their clients, where it's not so bureaucratic and time consuming, and so they want to be more as efficient. They've been very thankful for that. Matter of fact, I'm going to be meeting with the Defense Association coming up just to talk about some of the things we've done and delivered on some of the promises we made. But to get back to your original point about the prosecutor's office, it's very good. The way cases are prosecuted now are much more dependent now on technology and different things like that. Very different than when I started in police work. And so they got to make sure when they're bringing a case to a jury, to trial, that it can meet that standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. And sometimes we get at odds a little bit because we arrest people based on probable cause, which is basically 50.1%.
Doesn't convict them.
That does not convict people. Because with the juries, you got to remember, we've lost the benefit of the doubt because of the way, we've handled, not just in St. Lucie County, but just law enforcement in general. And that's why it's so important that we implement the highest standards and values. That's what we're really trying to strive towards. And you know what? When we take a loss, we got to look at ourselves. What could we do better? And make those improvements each and every single day and focus on those continuous improvements.
Sheriff, just spitballing ideas
Sure.
here, okay? Are there any initiatives that you would like to bring to the county where you would like to tell, the state attorney, we want to ratchet things up. We would like there to be harsher penalties for this. We would like you to prosecute these cases more aggressively. I don't know if you have any ideas to that effect or if you could talk more about that.
So one of the things now I'm in charge of is the jail, okay? And that's a tremendous cost to the taxpayers here. So although I'm very pro, let's lock up the bad guys and get the bad guys off the street, I also think that comes with a price, okay? And so one of the things that we do is we're very data driven. And one of the things we're seeing is there's quite a few defendants at the jail. We house about 1,200 inmates a day at the jail. We have close to 300 that are in there on probation violations, and that could just be from not showing up to an appointment to not paying a fee or failing a drug test, different things like that. And there should be penalties for that. But making their probation more accessible, I think, is important. I had a very good conversation with the Department of Corrections. They've started an initiative, I believe, in Palm Beach where they have a mobile office, basically. They invested about $100,000, have basically a large kind of like RV that goes around to different communities, makes it more accessible for people who can't drive, say, an hour to go check in with their probation officer once a week. And that has curtailed people being arrested for probation violations, which then lessens the cost for us as taxpayers for not housing people for minor violations such as that. That's just one example.
Okay.
So there's some of the things I want to look to do that I think could be, and again, being fiscally conservative, I think is a good solution to a problem. Okay, we're having a lot of probation violations. Let's look at the underlying reasons why, see what we can do to affect those changes. So as we get in the weeds a little bit more here and looking at the data, because we're going to be a very data-driven organization, and we hired a very, very good crime analysis manager and intelligence manager that's going to be able to provide us that data and really set us up for the direction we want to go with initiatives such as that.
Okay, good answers. Doing good so far, Sheriff.
All right, yeah.
Let's talk about, I don't know if you were asked about this during the election season, but you're on the ballot at the same time as recreational marijuana, which did not pass.
Right.
Were you asked to opine on that? What was your feeling on did you support Amendment 3 or did you want it to fail?
I wanted it to fail.
I'm
not a fan of it, and I have a lot of different reasons why. But it was up to the voters. But I was not. Listen, I've seen what drug use has done to people's lives over time, and the old saying about marijuana being a gateway drug and different things like that. Most hardcore drug users will tell you the first drug they used was marijuana, and I get all the reasons why it has been successful in terms of being medicinal and things like that, which I support. But just in terms of recreational use, I think we have enough problems already, with alcohol and drugs that, just adding on to that, and it really impacts other people's quality of life too. I've been to places before where it is legalized recreationally, and being a non-user, I don't have the same rights anymore that I could enjoy just sitting at a restaurant or walking down the street where that smell is there.
Very
and
true.
it's, so it does impact other people, I think, in a negative way. And so I was happy that it failed.
Are there any, turning the page, something totally different now. Are there any unsolved cases that you would like to see solved maybe in the next 100 days? Or are there any cases that you're, looking to make a move on now that you're in this role?
Yeah, so we have an extraordinary cold case detective, Paul Taylor, who has solved about 9 cold cases thus far, including one after I took office. And we have about 29 that are currently still unsolved that he's taken a look at. Some of these cases just kind of fell through the cracks a little bit and need a fresh eye. And Paul's just very passionate about that. He's very good about that. And so is our entire criminal investigations division. Matter of fact, I'm meeting with them coming up in the next week or so. I'm just going to have a little lunch, and just so I can thank them for all the hard work they've done, because they've been, they're working at a new standard and different things, and they're doing a great job. So I want to see us continue with that. I want to see more accountability throughout the organization, so all of our victims, their cases are looked at the right way. I took some criticism when I was at the city of Port St. Lucie for some victims that weren't happy with how their cases were classified, whether they were a drug overdose, they felt it was a homicide, or
Elise.
Several. Elise is just one.
Elise is the big one.
Yeah.
Can we talk about it?
We could talk about anything. Yeah. I don't know if it's still open an investigation or not. To be fair. But I could tell you what I know, and I could tell you what I did to help her mother in that case. And this is what frustrates me sometimes is I'm a very accessible servant leader, I believe. I really want to help people. I get letters all the time from people. I have somebody who's concerned about their pregnant sister-in-law in our jail and wrote a great letter last night. And I called that person at 7 o'clock at night and had a conversation because it's important to them. It's important to me. And the person's no longer in our jail. They're in Okeechobee, but it's something I can pass along to that sheriff and have a conversation. I had a mutual friend from Lee Steed that reached out to me about her mom being upset with the investigation, spoke to her, had great conversations. And I guarantee people access, not outcomes. And you know what? We did a thorough investigation looking back into that. I'm very confident in the investigation that was done, working with our partners at the medical examiner's office. And oftentimes, the medical examiner is going to determine what the outcome of the case is. Not the chief of police, not the sheriff. And I think people have a hard time, but being that I am the most visible public servant in this community, I'm going to take the hits. And that's fine. I'm willing to take the hits knowing that we did the best job we could. We did things the right way. We looked at those concerns. We addressed those concerns. And I think sometimes people just have a hard time. It's very painful anytime you lose somebody. I'm not going to, we've all lost somebody that's near and dear to us, and we want other answers, and it's hard to rationalize irrational outcomes. But, I felt very good about that case, and I'm going to try to keep applying the same type of service to other people that I come across and not get discouraged by that.
It happens all the time where an expert can be hired or brought on board to Monday morning quarterback what the first guy did. Mm-hmm. So in the Elise case with the medical examiner's conclusion, we have other medical examiners, not for the county, but outside experts who are saying, well, I don't agree.
Right.
Is there anything that could move the needle? Is there any other expert opinion or any other assessment that might infuse some new energy into that case? Or do you just think, candidly, it's a done deal?
Well, I don't think it's a done deal until the case is closed. And to be fair to the people still working that case, I think they have to always, we can't get dug in on any one thing. The only thing I'll say is those experts that were weighing in, and I know this for a fact, were weighing in with opinions on things without having all the facts of the case.
Yep.
And I think that's just completely unfair. That's taken Monday morning quarterback into a different level. Facts before acts. There's always a couple sides to every story. We got to look at the whole thing. One of the things I've just learned over my tenure is when I hear about something the very first time, I think, oh man, that's really bad. This officer's going to be, or deputy's going to be in a lot of trouble for what just happened. But then when you get all of the facts, and that's why I'm so in favor of body-worn cameras, because it tells the entire story. You could put yourself in that person's position, why they made a certain decision or what really transpired before the action happened. It gives you the whole story. Mm-hmm. And I think we, as a society, we have gotten away from that. And social media is a lot to blame for that. That has become such a force multiplier in dramatizing a lot of these issues because people take it to the court of public opinion. We don't have a chance to offer like a trial defense or anything like that. And so what happens is you see a lot of public agencies almost become like social media response teams where we're responding to every little thing that gets said or leaked out to the press. And I want to be transparent, but we also have to protect the integrity of the cases too when some of these things are going on. So there's just a lot of factors that go into that, but I'm interested to see what's going to happen with the outcome of that case, and I've been following it very closely. And, I still think about her mom often, and, some of the conversations were good, some were not so good just because there's a lot of emotion involved, and I understand that.
Of course.
But I
what
pray
about
for them every
Calvin,
day.
Sheriff? What about that case?
Calvin
Barry?
I'm very confident in that case. That case, I believe, is closed. That's another person that is not happy with the outcome of the investigation. But again, we went back, worked with her, hired private investigator who used to be a detective down in Broward County.
Yep.
Answered about 105 different questions, scenarios, had soil tested out of the canal, all kinds of different things. So that one I'm very confident about. That was headed up by actually our current chief down there, and who was assistant chief for me at the time, really took that one on. And I mean, he'd be better to answer that question. But yeah, that's another frequent flyer that I hear from often that's not happy with the outcome of that case. But I'm very confident with that investigation.
Thank you for your willingness to talk about it. All right, let's turn the page here. There is so much development happening in the county. My goodness, especially out west, and it keeps on coming. What are your concerns about that? And is this agency, as it stands, staffed adequately to handle all these people that are coming from all over the country to St. Lucie County?
So, as a county, I know from working in the South County, where the greatest growth came from, that they're working on becoming adequately staffed. I don't think they're adequately staffed right now based on 1.2 officers per 1,000. That's in the city of Port St. Lucie. I think they got some work to do down there to make sure we can not only maintain the level of service, but improve upon it. And here in St. Lucie County, though, we're starting to see, especially in unincorporated areas of St. Lucie County, because you have the city of Fort Pierce, Port St. Lucie, and you have 80,000 people that live in the unincorporated section, but there's a lot of land here. And a lot of land west of town is being developed. You know, you see different developments with 8,000 homes. And that's something we have to really get a handle on. And that's what I look forward to working with the county administrator on, is really seeing where that development's going to be, and then working strategically to grow the department so we can handle the demands of the 911 calls for service, the number of students that are going to be moving into this county, because we have school security is just so important. Do we have the capacity at the jail, our courthouses? So there's a lot of different things that we have to look at. Fortunately, though, throughout my entire career, my 26 years prior to coming here, I dealt with growth. I dealt with growth at an executive level. I know all about strategic planning. One of the things we're doing right now is reconfiguring our patrol zones. Mm-hmm. Our patrol zones were created 40 years ago. And they were created 40 years ago basically using a straight line and a ruler going across a map, because data-driven policing wasn't really around back then. And so they just broke the county up into equal segments. Well, a lot's changed since then. We've lost a lot of land to annexations into cities. Our areas are smaller. We're serving 80,000 people. So we're going to reconfigure our zones. We're going to be very data-driven. And again, create the best model we can to service the public that we're expected to serve, and using the resources we currently have to the best of our ability, while keeping our eye on the future for the growth and the strategic growth of this county.
Okay, I got 2 minutes left with you.
Yes, sir.
I think it was a good idea, actually, to give you sort of like a final thought, or this is the wild card question, right? Is there anything that I'm not asking you to this point that you want to be asked? Like, Mike, ask me this. Have at it.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I just, for me, I mean, the message that I want to get across to everybody, especially within the organization, is that, I know we've been through a lot of change in a short amount of time, but the change, if you just trust the process, the outcome's going to take care of itself. We're going to be a premier organization, first class, family, adhering to the highest standards and values that we can, being the safest county in the state of Florida. That's really what our vision, our goal is. That's our Super Bowl championships. But being part of an agency we can all be proud of. And I think for a long time, and I think you see this a lot throughout the state of Florida, where it's all about the sheriff and whose names are on the buildings. That's not what I'm all about. Matter of fact, I took my name off all the different logos. The new branding is all about just the St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office, because this is a rented title. All right, I'm not going to be here forever. I plan to be here for quite a long time, as long as the voters are going to have me here and they trust what I'm doing and what we're building here. But it's not about me. It's about the organization, and I want to get that message across to them, that I care about them. I want to see the very best for them and make this organization working together. I'm telling you, the sky's the limit. Once we get that standard in place and they understand, I got to do a better job of communicating that to them, making sure they understand it's for their best interest, not just mine, because nobody's going to buy into anything if it's all about me. So, you know what, once they understand what it's all about and what this vision really is all about, I think we're going to get tremendous buy-in, and it's going to be off to the races.